I care little for how humanity will disappear. Instead, I often think of what it would be like to live in a world without humans. One story that tries to answer this question is World's End Touring. This story skips past the events that led up to and caused the apocalypse, instead beginning years after the cataclysmic event. In this broken world, a girl named Yoko, who is accompanied by her cyborg companion Ari, the girls occasionally have electricity, and they search for Yoko's sister by following landmarks that are present in her old social media posts. While finding Yoko's sister is important, the girls have other priorities, such as finding food and shelter as they travel. Thankfully, these are easy needs to fulfill, as whatever wiped out the human race left structures untouched, with only natural elements contributing to their deterioration. Although it first seemed that humanity must have just vanished, there are signs that humanity's departure wasn't so peaceful. Military vehicles, such as tanks and supply trucks, are common sights for the girls, as they seem comfortable with them when encountered. One tank they find is automated, controlled by a computer program. This program warns the girls that the radiation level in the atmosphere is massive, and that it is unsafe outdoors. Upon investigation, the tank was filled with the corpses of fallen soldiers. Similarly, there are many vehicles that seem out of place, such as an intact airplane in the middle of a forest, or a ship covered with vegetation next to a main road. Buildings are sinking into the ocean, the sea level has risen significantly, and wild storms are commonplace. Although the girls are alone throughout the majority of their journey, they do bump into a few odd characters. One of these is a cyborg, who they rescued by restoring power to his system. The girls are surprised to meet him, as he is the first living being they have encountered. After discovering he lost his memories, the group travels to the location in a photograph he was carrying. It turns out to be his family's favorite spot. The girls leave him, and he reminisces about his past. He was a soldier who had his body replaced with that of a robot's. After a disaster in the harbor, he went to rescue his family, but it was too late, and his body was destroyed, cut in half. While looking at the picture of his family, the cyborg loses power and falls into the harbor. Out of the few encounters the girls have, this one stood out to me the most, as it highlights why the girls are able to keep moving forward in such a lonely world. Unlike the girls, the cyborg had no real attachments to anything, and all he could do was cling on to the memory of his family. This contrasts the girls, who have each other, as their bond gives them hope and a reason to continue moving forward, as seen by the search for Yoko's sister. Despite the world they once lived in being destroyed, the girls seem content, taking every opportunity possible to have fun and make memories together. They have each other, and because of that, they have the motivation to keep on living. The girls will never give in to the loneliness or any other doom because of this. They are indifferent to the destruction and enjoy touring the post-apocalyptic world they reside in, because what is life if you don't make the most of it? The sentiment of moving forward because you have each other is present in another work that most likely inspired World's End Touring. Girls' Last Tour takes place in a barren post-industrial world called the Layered City. Sisters Cheeto and Yuri travel, looking for any signs of life as they head to the highest point in the city. There are no real purpose for the girls heading to this point. They are simply having faith that it will be safe and have many resources. Unlike World's End Touring, Girls' Last Tour is very nihilistic, and although the girls in this story make the best of their situation, there is this feeling of doom that lingers on every page. An intriguing thing about Girls' Last Tour is the setting. As the girls progress through the layered city, the structures around them change, with the buildings becoming less deteriorated and more futuristic. Although the world around the girls changes, the girls themselves remain static, not letting the bleak situation they're in get them down. One of the most intriguing points of this story is the futility of creating a legacy. For instance, the girls meet a cartographer who is trying to create a map of the layered city. The remaining humans are few and far between, and at the end of the day, the map will never be used by another human. The map this cartographer works on is his livelihood, his life. But, in a sad twist of irony, the map is scattered throughout the city, destroyed. The cartographer tried to leave something of himself behind for future humans to find, who will most likely never even exist, and his legacy was destroyed in an instant. These nihilistic themes are not just limited to this one encounter. In every instance the girls meet survivors or some sort of sentient being, the futility of these beings' actions is highlighted. These people are on their own in this world, and they can only try and live out their dreams while struggling to survive. It is repeated time and time again that nothing in this world really matters in the long run, which is perpetuated in how the survivors fail to succeed in achieving their goals. Another aspect of this story is the overwhelming sense of loneliness, which is conveyed through the art and paneling. When it isn't focusing on the girls, the artwork depicts barren landscapes, corrupted cities, and the ruins of the old world. Many panels, and even spreads, are dedicated to invoking this feeling in the reader. This loneliness is contrasted by the girls, who, more often than not, rely on each other for support. If the girls were on their own, they would most likely have given up trying to survive long ago, but because they have each other, they can carry on with their journey. Like World's End touring, the girls in this story have fun and try to experience life to the best of their ability, but because the only world they know is one of despair, they don't quite understand the pleasures of the world they live in. Although Girls' Last Tour focuses on the futility of legacy, one thing that really caught my eye was the importance of books in this world. The girls make sure to collect books as they travel, and although they may not be able to understand everything they come across, they recognize the importance of literature, as it can be a window for future generations to understand what the world was like in the past. But, like other forms of legacy, collecting books is just another useless pastime, as in a world without people, there's nobody to care about books or the past or anything of that sort. In the world of Heartgear, World War III destroyed humanity, and the world fell into ruin. All humans have been wiped out, and robots of varying degrees of sentience now inhabit the world. Well, all humans except for one girl named Rue. It has been around 200 years since the war, and Rue is the last person on Earth. Fortunately for her, some benevolent robots take her in. One day, their peaceful life is interrupted by a corrupted robot who destroys one of Rue's caretakers. From then on, Rue and her robot companion, Chrome, look for a way to repair and restore their comrade. On their journey, Rue and Chrome encounter a strange being in a jungle. This being, named Henryk Stokowski, was once a human. 50 years before the war began, Henryk was a biological researcher who was dying from a degenerative disease. This disease was a neurological condition, so even if Henryk became a cyborg, he would still fall victim to this illness. Because of his condition, Henryk was offered to take part in an experiment that would digitalize his memory and soul and put them in a robotic body. Henryk agreed to this experiment because he wanted to be able to continue his research and live out life. Unfortunately for him, World War III broke out, and Henryk was forced to watch the world fall to ruin. As a robot, Henryk was granted his wish of immortality, but he was unable to fulfill his dreams. Because of these violent robots roaming the Earth, he had to live in seclusion and pass time through biological research. Over time, Henryk became lonely and lost his desire to really live. He wondered if he was really alive, as he lacked the physical features that made him a human. For decades, Henryk thought he was the last human on Earth, but even then, was he a human? For Henryk, it was an easy decision to transfer into a robotic body. He had nothing to lose, and could only choose between death and immortality. This immortality came at a cost, where he could only spend his days alone in a world without humans. But is that really such a bad thing? I think it is pretty easy to wish to be in a world without humans. So many times in life we are hurt and think that perhaps if we were truly alone, none of the pain we have experienced would have ever happened. Alice in Hell fully embraces this sentiment, and after all the horrible things the story's protagonist endures, it is easy to see why he would want to live in a world without people. Alice in Hell takes place in a destroyed world, yet, instead of being unpopulated, humans have survived. The lack of resources in this world has led to factions and wars developing, but this story's protagonist, Shu, wants none of it. Shu would prefer to live in a world without humans, only wanting his broken android, Alice, as a companion. After experiencing a myriad of traumatic events as a child, Shu retreated from society to live in an abandoned city called the Alamo. For a while he lives a lonely life, killing those he encounters with his sniper rifle. One day, he inadvertently saves a commune leader from a group of bandits, and his life spirals out of control from there. He's forced to re-enter society, which leads to him being abused not only by his enemies, but by his peers as well. Because of this, Shu is heavily defensive, and has no meaningful relationships in his life. All Shu wants to do is spend time making the Alamo safer and living by himself. In this work, the Alamo can be seen as sort of a metaphor for Shu. Like Shu, the Alamo is a very guarded place. Shu will go to great lengths to protect the Alamo, even harming it to keep people out or away. Shu does this with himself as well, as he does his best to make sure no one can get close, even if that safety has a cost. Whenever Shu is at the Alamo, he is happiest. Much like the Alamo, when Shu is alone, he thrives, and when people do show up at the Alamo, Shu becomes distressed and does everything in his power to keep them away. Much like the previous works I've discussed, Alice in Hell is very nihilistic, as the character's actions are very radical, and they ultimately end in despair. Although Shu lives in a populated world, he would much rather live in a world without humans, and he tries to create that feeling in the Alamo. Usuzumi no Hate takes place in a world that has been destroyed by a disease that was caused by alien life forms called executioners. This disease, called crystallosis, produces crystals that form on one's body, and these crystals would eventually puncture the victim's organs, ending their life. This disease has wiped out virtually all of humanity, and the world is in ruin. Ushimitsu is a cyborg who has survived this disaster, seemingly immune to crystallosis. She travels around the ruins of a city with her blob companion thing, looking for resources. She also works to purify the city of crystallosis. Despite being a cyborg, Ushimitsu is very human, which is most prevalent in how she treats the purification process. She collects the bodies of crystallosis victims and takes them to a morgue, where she performs funeral rites before cremating the corpses. She obviously doesn't have to do this, as she's pretty much the last person on Earth, but as she wants the deceased to have a happy afterlife, she does it anyways. Much like the previous stories, Ushimitsu learns about the world through the things that humans have left behind. For instance, in Chapter 4, Ushimitsu comes across an old cliffside manor. The exterior is covered with plant life, but somehow the structure is still intact. Upon entering the home, Ushimitsu sees that something is off, eventually realizing that everything is in superb condition. She comes across an audio tape, and when she plays it, she hears a message from the owner of the home to their maid. This is a goodbye message, where the owner states they have contracted crystallosis, and they thank the maid for her service and dedication. Suddenly, an android enters the room, and Ushimitsu draws her pistol, but it is the maid mentioned in the tape. She has been waiting for a doctor to come and help her master, and she asks Ushimitsu if she's a doctor. Ushimitsu explains that she's cleaning up after crystallosis, and that the maid's master is dead. With her master gone, the maid sees no purpose in her existence and grabs Ushimitsu's weapon and tries to turn it on herself. Ushimitsu stops her and states that the maid must take care of her master's corpse until he receives a proper burial, and that she will not give him a proper burial until she has dealt with the rest of crystallosis. This gave the maid a new purpose, as she would protect her master's corpse until the day Ushimitsu returns. Despite being an android, the maid is very similar to Ushimitsu. They both live in a lonely world, doing their duties to the best of their ability, in spite of the fact that nobody is there to appreciate or acknowledge their efforts. They work in the hope that one day, their work will be meaningful to those they care about. In the maid's case, she waited for the day her master could receive medical treatment, and for Ushimitsu, she waits for any remaining survivors. Upon realizing that her work would never benefit the person she cared about, the maid felt no motivation to carry on, thinking of herself as a failure of a machine. In a more nihilistic work, Ushimitsu would have granted the maid's wish and terminated her, but in Usuzumi no Hate takes a much different approach. It establishes that life is about creating your own purpose. As seen in Ushimitsu's efforts to restore the city, she has the agency to do whatever she'd like in this lawless world. As seen with her other encounters with other robots, although she can aimlessly tour the world or hide from the dangers of reality, she chooses to create a purpose and fulfill that purpose. It is easy for one to say that life is meaningless, but this serves as an excuse to hide from creating a purpose for oneself. Later, gamers.